Welcome to A Moment of Bach, where we take our favorite moments from the composer's vast musical output, even just a minute's worth, or even a few seconds, and show you why we think they are remarkable. We are your hosts, Alex and Christian Giebert, and today's moment comes from the Fugue No. 4 in C-sharp minor, the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 1. The fugue stands like a mighty cathedral. Said the 19th century commentator Hugo Riemann, and he calls the C-sharp minor prelude and fugue the Holy of Holies. Prelude is this beautiful Sicilian but it's undeniable that the real meat and potatoes of the set is the fugue. One of only 2 fugues in the entire Well-Tempered Clavier Books 1 and 2 that has 5 voices. Mostly they have 3 or 4. Yeah. And when a fugue has more than 4 parts, the idea of each part having a lot of activity and quickness is a little diminished in favor of the idea of all the parts having a really sturdy, strong structure. Otherwise, you cannot support that many independent parts happening at once. And so it is this concept of architecture of the fugue, based on its firm subject, that is most interesting to us today. I will get to a moment at the end, but I don't want to skip this giant fugue, one of the longest ones. And I don't want to miss what's going on inside either, because there are also a few surprise counter subjects or themes that will occur partway through. So Alex, if this fugue is not flowery and florid and fast, then what kind of musical genre or period does it seem like? Seems a little more ancient. Exactly. It's almost a prima pratica, a first practice, an old-style fugue. A fugue in the old style. Think of Bach's Dona Nobis Pacem, something that has a lot of long notes in it. And if it does have fast notes, those are anchored by long tones. And if it does have those fast notes, then those are generally a second subject or a counter subject. And they happen after a firm foundation has been laid. And that's exactly the case with this one. This is a suggestion from listener Elia, who says, "Greetings from Germany. Elia would love for us to review the fugue from BWV 849. So let's first talk about its subject. Yep. It's a solid 4 notes. But the harpsichordist Bertrand Cuiller says this in the companion video in the Netherlands Bach Society website. It's a little bit peculiar that this fugue subject ends up being so strong sounding, because it seems like it would be a unstable choice to have the first melodic leap be so weird. We start on C sharp. We know this is our key in our ears because we ended in C sharp in the previous movement. So we know we're probably going to go back to C sharp minor from this final chord of the prelude, C sharp major, which is nothing more than the ending of the C sharp minor prelude. And now here comes the fugue in C sharp, so we're expecting that first note to probably be C sharp, and it is. And then the second note is a half step lower, a raised leading tone, Do to T. We expected that too. But then we have a strange interval. It is the diminished fourth. Now picture a piano. If you can picture where C is, if you can find C on a piano, even if you can't do that, picture, you know how it has groups of black notes that are 2 and then 3. Now think about the group of black notes that's 2. So the one on the left is C sharp, that's our first note. Then we step down a half step to the white note to the left, that's C natural, that's C. In this case, it's written as a B sharp, but it is that note because it must be written that way in order to work within this scale. And then we leap up, which is musically dissonant, but visually, looking at a piano, seems like just a normal thing you might do. Up 2 white notes to E, to the 3rd scale degree in C sharp minor. And then, in a very symmetrical and aesthetically pleasing move, we step down a half step to D sharp, the black note on the right of the 2 black notes. You pointed out, Alex, that the shape of these keys is even a little bit architectural. It's almost like a little arch. You have white note, white note, almost makes like a upside down U. Yep. Although the way that it's played sort of makes a horseshoe shape. But either way, it's some sort of suggestion of a building block, as fugues are, but even its shape seems sturdy. But you know what I thought of when I heard this subject the first time? You know what it reminded me of?
What's that?
Like an actual melody of something, of Bach's. Not of Bach's, but a melody that he used a lot in his cantatas.
What's that?
Advent.
Oh, in 61, Nun kommt der Heiden Heiland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Savior of the Nations Come. Nun kommt der Heiden Heiland.
Right, if you just repeat that first note.
If you take out, no, not even that, all you have to do is take out the lower neighbor decoration on the D sharp. So we have...
Right, I mean, the first note happens twice.
Oh, right. Yeah, you just take the first 2 notes and put them together, and then the next note is present in the fugue subject at the very end, after those 4 notes. The 5th note goes back to Do.
Yeah,
rounds
that
it
works.
out.
That's pretty much it.
It's not even a stretch a little bit. It is Nun kommt der Heiden Heiland without a neighbor tone. It's just a reduction of Nun kommt. It's a melodic skeleton of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that this is like a distillation of Nun kommt der Heiden Heiland, because that's the opposite of how Bach treats a lot of these chorale melodies when he does chorale preludes and things like that. And this melody is no exception. In a previous episode of A Moment of Bach, we talked about the organ chorale prelude on Nun kommt der Heiden Heiland, which was BWV 659. That one, which is from the Great 18 Chorales collection, in that one we have even by the standards of Bach, an extremely ornamented version of the melody, so much that if you didn't know it well, you would not be able to pick it out. And here, as you say, in this one, Christian, basically that melody distilled down to just 4 building blocks.
Mm-hmm. Or 5 if you count the last note, I guess.
I guess you kind of should, because it's functional. It leads there. And every time he does it, he has a last note.
I think you would count that.
I think he usually has it, right?
It is when the
always.
next part enters, but that's fine. It's not like that every time. To your point about ornamentation of the melody of Savior of the Nations Come, by the way, I'm not saying that this is a setting of that melody. It's just very close. It does seem like about as close as you can get without being it literally. That B sharp, the second note, is already an ornamentation. It could be B natural, and then it would be more of a traditional way to sing Savior of the Nations Come. But Bach opts for the ornamented version like he did in BWV 61 and other places. That kind of goes along with the theme of architecture, because Baroque music is a lot like very fancy architecture, where there is structure. There are decorations that emerge later, and that's what happens in this fugue. Later on, we have faster notes. But early on, until measure 36, we don't have anything. It's almost like we're building it. We're building the cathedral. We're setting everything up. And then at measure 36, something new occurs, and that is where we hear an 8-note theme. Which is a good contrast to what is essentially the smallest theme in all of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. You were asking if this was a counter subject, but I think it could be a lately entering counter subject, but it doesn't happen right away. It's another theme for sure, and it's developed, but it's not to the level of making this into a double fugue with two subjects. That occurs at measure 36, and it is developed because right afterwards you hear it in the left hand inverted, melodically inverted, at measure 41. You see that?
Yeah.
And then you have it back at measure 45 in its original contour. And then shortly afterwards, in bar 49, a third theme enters. And it's actually rather straightforward. It's the easiest one of the three to justify. It's the easiest one to listen to. And it ends with a simple cadential step thing. But what's characteristic about it is its rhythm and its leap of a fourth there at the beginning. Two, three, four, one, and a two. And we know that that should be considered a third theme because it keeps popping up in other ways and is inverted contrapuntally, not melodically, just like sometimes it's on the top, sometimes it's on the bottom type of thing. A little bit confusing when we use the word inversion because it has different meanings in music theory.
Yeah.
But this is not a subject. It doesn't really deserve that title, so this is not a triple fugue either. I think this is just a really long, really developed fugue with a long exposition, simple and old style. Stile antico is another word that we can use to describe it. Old style, first practice, long note subject. After which Bach pulls us 100 years later into the future with some faster ornamentation on that second theme, and then further decorates this building with a third theme. And then there's still like another half of a fugue to go, because there's so much potential for material here. And the denseness of 5 parts together makes this just never seem dead in any spot. Sometimes the voices go down to 4 or 3 or 2, but the musical momentum never goes away. Sometimes that main theme, that diminished fourth interval, is sometimes smoothed out into a perfect fourth. The main theme also never really lets up. It has almost 30 instances of occurring.
This is what makes me think this doesn't count as a double or triple fugue, Christian, because, as you said, these second and third themes that you mentioned, the more busy ones, especially the second one, they don't really take the seat of honor like the first one does. That first one carries us the whole way.
Yeah, it is the cornerstone. It's the walls or the floor. It's the foundation.
Right, and the others are the decoration on the pillar, as the harpsichordist Clavier mentions in the companion video. It does make me think of those pillars. I think it's called a pilaster, that refers to the ornamented section near the top of a pillar. So the fugue subject with its 4 notes is the pillar itself holding up the structure, and then the ornamentation is literally the ornamentation, right?
The second theme could be the sculpting filigree on the top of it and the bottom of the pillar.
Exactly.
And the third as well.
And it's showing how this art fits this time period. The Baroque music fits with the time period of Baroque architecture and art. It's always interesting to look at the music of a given era and see how it philosophically relates to the rest of the art of that era. I always think of Impressionist music, French Impressionist music. That music sounds a little bit vague, a little bit opaque, like you're not looking through a clear window, but instead something just a little bit muted. And then when you look at Impressionist art, it's like that, especially the pointillism stuff. You look up too close and you can't make anything out. You have to sort of glaze over and get the sort of vibe of the main picture. That's how Impressionist music sounds, as well as the Impressionistic art looks.
And yet, remarkably, the collection, the book of Well-Tempered Clavier, number 1 and number 2, even though they were widely known around Germany, fell completely out of fashion just after Bach's death because they were in an old style, even though they had newer elements to him, Baroque elements. The Baroque period was ending, and it wasn't until a resurgence of appreciation in counterpoint happened sort of as a bonus feature of some of the later classical period around 1800, where Mozart started really getting into fugue, and a revival of this older art form happened, which is why we get so many glorious fugues in Mozart's church music and things like that. And as we conclude the fugue, we get to the moment of the day. We are about to resolve into our tonic key of C sharp. And as Bach does often, and other composers as well, that will not be the end, but there will be a brief coda of a few measures where the harmony still settles into place, even though the bass note and even the top note are completely finished, and they will just hold a C sharp on the bottom and the bass voice for 4 measures long, a C sharp in the soprano, the top part, for 4 measures long. So long that even the bass note is almost faded out in the harpsichord by the time you reach the end.
Yeah.
Since it's abstractly there, it still counts. Although I will say that if you played it on an organ, I think it would be a lot spicier in a way.
I mean, just in general, I think some of the clarity between this austere main subject and then the rest of the more lighthearted stuff would be actually more interesting if it was arranged for like a small wind group or something, maybe woodwind quintet or something like that. Mm-hmm. I haven't checked the ranges to see if that really works, but it could be cool for
I'm
woodwind
sure this
quartet.
Would make a great quintet.
Woodwind quintet, yeah.
String quintet would be just
string quintet would be
safer choice.
A safer choice. I think woodwind quintet might be really interesting though, just because of the colors are so unique.
Yeah.
But Bach wrote this for the clavier. So he had the harpsichord in mind here. Clavier meaning keyboard. So don't you think that Bach would have assumed that this would have been played on harpsichord? Maybe clavichord?
Yeah. I mean, it's written for 2 hands. If he wrote a completely abstract 5-part fugue, he would have no need to make it playable in 2 hands. He would have 5 parts spread out so low and high that it would take 3 or 4 hands to do if it was translated into keyboard. But that's not the case. This is kind of extra remarkable that not only did he write a 5-voice fugue, but he did so in a way that is possible to be played by 2 hands, which means that if anything goes low or if anything goes high, there's got to be a gap in the middle. And there is. Even though there are 5 independent parts, that still works. And the trickery necessary in the way that Bach wrote the piece, but also in the way that someone must play it, makes it work. So coming into that coda at the end, right on the beat, is a lovely dissonance.
Yeah.
The 5 voices also really sell this dissonance. It's so strange because it seems almost major, but it's not yet. It almost seems like you're getting the Picardy third major chord that happens at the end of a piece in minor.
Right. In
a lot of Baroque music and in a lot of Bach.
It seems like that's what's about to happen, and it is in a second.
It's not a 1 chord there, though. This chord, this is deceptive because the tenor voice has scale degree 6, an A. So the chord is in fact an F sharp minor chord, but the F sharp is not achieved until beat 3. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And the A is present in the tenor, and the chord 5th, the C sharp, is present in the bass and the upper soprano. Meanwhile, in those 2 alto parts, you have a E sharp, which is not part of this chord, but a strong beat dissonance. But it quickly moves away and becomes much more inoffensive, goes down to a C sharp. And then that upper alto part is a suspension against the tenor part that resolves on beat 3. To reveal the root of this chord to be F sharp minor.
You could also make the case that is just a C sharp major chord with the A. Well, I guess you can't really make that case.
It's like a elephant in the room type of thing that cannot be wished away with music theory trickery.
Yeah.
It just can't be, even though you want it so bad, because if that A natural wasn't there, this would just be a C sharp major chord.
It's very potent, right? It's not just an added tone or even, it's not even like an ornament that resolves. It doesn't. It's insistent.
It's a chord tone. You
know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of your moment that you picked from the Crucifixus.
It's exactly the same.
It's the same chord.
Yeah.
In that one, we landed on what we thought was going to be E, really E minor is what we were used to hearing at the end of this Passacaglia repetition. It lands on E minor usually. This one was going to land on an E major. It was getting there, but the tenor voice sings at a strong C natural against that E major sound in the orchestra, and it's just this weird augmented chord.
Yeah, it sounds to our ears like an augmented triad. Well, that's what it is. In this case, the G sharp and the A natural are present along with the E sharp.
Yeah.
And you're right, it doesn't work.
Well, it's kind of like when we're recording these podcast episodes and we're about to come to the end, but there's one more thing we really have to talk about. But man, we could have ended right there and it would have been a nice ending, you know.
Except that could be deleted. This can't. That's the thing. It's like this is like you go to the airport, you're about to fly internationally. All your bags are packed, everything's ready. You look right, you packed everything. Everything is ready. All is well. You're about to get on. You have everything. You forgot your passport. You forgot your form of ID. And that's like, well, everything else is good and it really checks out except for something that cannot be fixed, you know. It's a critical failure, but just enough to make the thing not the thing you thought it was.
Yeah, its essence has changed, not just something superficial about it has changed.
You can almost make yourself believe that it is the other thing, but there is a deep truth that it's just not that thing.
And now, let's hear Christian's moment one more time. That is the ending of the Fugue in C sharp minor from Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 1. If hearing this moment of Bach has inspired you to want to listen to more moments of Bach, then our podcast, listener, is right there for you, and we have almost 4 seasons worth of episodes available to listen to on pretty much any podcast player. And if you liked this recording, we always like to send you right to where we found it, and we'll leave the link in the description. That is the Netherlands Bach Society, who has given us permission to use their audio recordings for this podcast. They have all of Well-Tempered Clavier, Books 1 and 2, plus tons more Bach on their All of Bach project. That project is 10 years old now, and they are working steadily on completing recordings and high-quality video of all of Bach.
And even though they perform things basically on a weekly basis, they aren't done yet after 10 years, which is not surprising, considering the volume of work that Bach wrote in his life. So we will be taking a listener request next week. Alex, what will that be?
That will be a request from HG, who has asked for, Christian, speaking of German style and Italian style, HG has asked for the Italian Concerto. Italian Concerto, which is the Concerto in F major, BWV 971. We'll be looking at the second movement of that work.
Until next time, enjoy those moments.